Well, my guest today is an NAACP Image Award winning actress, former Miss Ohio USA, and she infiltrated a male-dominated world of sports announcing with a role on the NFL Today. She has graced the covers of Ebony and Jet magazines, and she is still one of the prettiest beauty queens that we have ever seen. And here to talk about her TV One Life After episode, I want you to help me welcome Miss Jayne Kennedy to the show. How you doing, Jayne?
Good morning. Wow, that was quite a setup.
Why, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on the show today.
And it's like, wow, I'm talking to Jayne Kennedy. Can't believe Jayne Kennedy. Now, do you know growing up, I'm going to tell you, growing up, whenever you saw a woman that was pretty and you were trying to describe a woman, you would say, you know, she looked like Jayne Kennedy. So you were always the epitome of beauty in the African American community. So when you would say that somebody was pretty, she looked like Jayne Kennedy. So you were always being that. So I know being beautiful. I know you're used to hearing that all the time, but I'm excited. You have a Life After episode that's going to be airing on Wednesday night, November 30th. Are you excited?
Yeah, probably not as much as my daughters. They're very, very excited about it, you know, because it's been a while since I've been out there, and so they're kind of used to, you know, being in the normal track of things and not in the limelight. So, you know, they've got their friends coming up to them saying, oh my gosh, you're going to be on TV, you're going to be on TV. And they're kind of excited about that.
Now, were you surprised when you got the call from TV One saying they wanted to do a story on your life after?
Well, they originally approached me maybe 3 years ago. And it wasn't necessarily a surprise, but, you know, it was definitely an honor that they had thought about asking me again, you know, because it has been such a long time. But I just didn't feel right about doing it at that particular time. And then they asked me again, and they wanted to do something like Life After the NFL, and I said, no, not really, you know. And so the slant just wasn't the right fit for me. Mm-hmm. And so finally I said, okay, you know what? What about Life After Hollywood? And we focus on family and how important that is. And, you know, that's my primary focus, has been for the last 20 years, you know. And they said, okay, we like that. And so that's the angle we went with.
Okay, that was good. Now, you were, to me, one of the first Black beauty queens that I can actually relate to and look up to. And you were such an inspiration to so many young girls. Did you realize that you were going to have that kind of impact?
Oh, never. No way. Especially back in the 70s. Well, I first started, you know, the very end of the 60s. And so you're coming out of a period of lots of unrest in the country, a lot of people, different organizations, different groups, you know, trying to find their place in society. You know, you have not only the Black Power movement, but the Women's Lib movement, the anti-Vietnam era. There were so many agendas, you know, and it was just almost ridiculous to think that you as a Black, as a woman, as a youth, you know, could actually make a difference, and you could go out to Hollywood, of all places, and actually succeed. And the fact that it happened for me was a real blessing, but it was an opportunity where things just sort of fell into place. It was a lot of hard work, but there were a lot of great opportunities that happened for me, and to be able to take advantage of them was basically, you know, just a product of hard work and just staying on it day to day to day. And as things happened, you know, they started happening so fast for me, I never really had a moment to step back and say, wow, you know, look at all that I'm doing. It was never that for me. It was a matter of loving the work that I did, and, okay, I got this, do it next. I got this, do it next.
Right.
You know?
Now, when you landed the job at NFL Today, especially being beautiful, was your beauty kind of a distraction at times to the men or to the men watching?
Well, again, you know, I never really looked at myself as, oh, I'm beautiful. You know, it was, you know, I was always, my hair's too this, it's not right, I'm too tall, I'm too this, too that. And, of course, you know, Hollywood every day is telling you, you're too this, too that, no. So, you know, I just never really looked at myself in that way. However, I do know that being a woman in that position was definitely something that you had to deal with on a daily basis. So, yeah, on the first day on the set, I didn't go in looking all sexy and, glamorous. As a matter of fact, I wore a bowling shirt, just my regular hairdo, regular makeup, just the girl next door, going in there on a job, and I'm here to do this job, and that's it.
Wow. So how did you land the job? I mean, where did your love for sports come from? And then how did they find out about you to land the job on the NFL Today?
Well, my dad had 5 daughters before he finally got his son, and he was very much into sports. He played baseball, and he had a pickup truck, and we'd ride around in the back of the pickup truck, follow him to all of his baseball games. He played on his church team and his company team. He worked for White Motors Trucking Corporation. So whenever they had games, we'd follow, and it was, hey, there's Herb Harrison. Those are all his cheerleaders, and we'd be on the sidelines just yelling and screaming. But, we were right there with him watching wrestling matches, boxing, football, basketball, you name it, that's how we grew up. Mm. And when it came time to, the leaves were changing colors, the wind started picking up, and I remember I'd say, oh, it's football weather, couldn't wait for football weather. But also that was a period in time where Jim Brown was king of football, and growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, you couldn't live in Cleveland and not be a Browns fan, not be a Jim Brown fan. So, it was always very much a part of my DNA. I hated the fact that boys could compete and girls didn't. We always got, little after-school programs, GAA, and if you can put a team together, you can play against some other girls in your same school, but there was never any, competitive leagues. This was all Title IX, so the opportunities were not there. So the best thing that I could do, the closest that I could get to sports, was being a cheerleader. So, I was always, even with track and field, there was no place for girls. And so I'd be the statistician, or I'd be the water boy girl. I just wanted to be on the team bus,
So how did you end up getting into the actual announcing? Did you audition? Did you hear about an audition?
Well, I did. I had started out as a singer, dancer, actress, and a bunch of other stuff, / but I never thought that I would go into sports broadcasting. And, I'd been acting in Hollywood for about 8 years. And I heard about this opportunity on the NFL Today and that they were looking for someone. And I asked my agent to submit me, and he said no. Said, they're looking for a journalist. They're not looking for someone like you, And I said, but I can do this. I love sports. I have so many friends in the sports world, It would be an easy job for me. So he said no, submitted a list. I wasn't on it. The whole list got turned down. He submitted a second list. I begged. The whole list got turned down. And I said, what? I'm going to just find another way. And so through some friends, Bob Stenner, who was a field producer for CBS Sports, Jim Brown, Jim Hill, we put together, and my ex, we went to Las Vegas. We went to the Don King Sportsman Ball, and Jim Hill let us use his camera crew, and we put together, like an audition tape. Mm-hmm. Minnesota Fats, Julius Erving, and Don King, and so I had this thing tucked under my arm because, I know how auditions go. You might walk in the door and they say, hey, Jayne, thank you for coming, and that's it. So I had this little unedited piece of tape, and I said, well, I'm going to do my best. And I got there, and there were, all these girls, blonde and blue eyes, and I said, well, they're not looking for somebody like me for sure. And I kicked back, relaxed, and Brent said he loved it. Head of CBS Sports said he loved it. The director of the show, producer of the show, they all loved the audition and decided that they wanted me for the show, but there was a huge concern about whether the Southern affiliates would go along with having 2 blacks on the show and 1 white. because Irv Cross was the other co-host along with Brent Musburger. So they sent my tape to the Southern affiliates, and I guess that's the reason that they decided to put me on was they came to a compromise. They would also add Jimmy the Greek, who was on the show but not on the desk. So the show went on the air with me, Brent Musburger, Irv Cross, and Jimmy the Greek.
Okay. Well, that's great. You know, at least you stayed at it. You knew you were going to be good at it. And before we go, I know your career took a turn because you suffered from something that's called endometriosis. How did that affect your career?
It affected my entire life. I had endometriosis for 11 years. I had been healthy pretty much all of my life. I had chickenpox when I was in first grade, and that was pretty much it. And, you know, I'd been very physically active. I was into sports, you know, but played tennis, and I ran, I exercised, I did everything. And then I put together the Jayne Kennedy Love Your Body exercise program, and it became number 3 in the country, along with Jane Fonda and Richard Simmons, and I'm doing tours around the country, and Coca-Cola had signed me to promote Brand Tab and Diet Coke. And so I'm doing all of this fitness campaign, and then all of a sudden I can't even do one sit-up. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what it was, but it was so painful. And the doctors tried to find out what it was. And finally, after about 3 days of tests, you know, my doctor said, I think you might have endometriosis. I said, what? You know, I never heard of it before. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, that's what it was. So we tried several treatments, laser laparoscopies, medication, new medication on the market. There was no cure for it, and the pain just kept escalating. And so finally my doctor looked at me. He said, well, you know, the best known treatment for this is pregnancy.
Really?
And I said, okay, God, I got the message. It was now time to start my family, because I had been putting it off for the longest time, and here the only illness that I get in my entire life was chickenpox years ago, and then now a disease where the doctor's telling me the best way to treat it is through pregnancy. And in general, it's very difficult to become pregnant with endometriosis. And within 3 months, I was pregnant. And I said, you know, this was just a message from God. This is what I was supposed to do.
And you have 5 children now, right?
I have 4.
You have 4 children.
Yes. My stepdaughter, Cheyenne, is 29. And then my daughters, Savannah, 26. Copper is 22. And Zaire is 16.
Wow, what a story. Well, everybody can catch your story on Wednesday night, November 30th on TV1's Life After with Jayne Kennedy. So if you want to know what she's been up to, say, hey, whatever happened to Jayne? Well, we're going to find out on Wednesday, November the 30th. Jayne, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It was such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an honor. I appreciate you taking the time. I really do.
You're so welcome.